Ari here from Paradigm Threat, and the topic of today is what is the deal with aliens? So, we've all heard some kind of story of aliens in our lives, either through fiction and media or through rumors of actual encounters. And the community, investigative community, has at times taken this very seriously, at other times not seriously at all. Many questions are still unanswered, so let's just start with questions. Are aliens different species from humans? Have they been around for hundreds of thousands or millions of years? Do they come from other solar systems, galaxies, even dimensions? Do they try to influence Earth? That's the biggest question of all, the only one that really matters here. So, to get a handle on this topic, you really just have to know the history of Earth. Again, Saturnian cosmology tells us exactly how solar systems start, with a Big Bang, a solar system that loses all its planets as the planets grow light and thin and drift to the outer solar system. The solar system is ready for life again. This is every system, not just ours. When that happens, a Big Bang occurs when some new mass like Saturn connects with the sun and forms all the planets. This starts the Golden Age. So, would aliens from another system, surely they exist, would they be able to visit us? So straight off the bat, the answer is no. But hypothetically, let's say yes, they could. Here's how difficult a problem it is to solve. Let's say you're witnessing another solar system go flash, and you're seeing planets form on it, and you want to go there and visit. If you can see through the primordial cloud, which existed throughout the Golden Age, you could travel to that solar system, quantum leap, and you might find an energy barrier equal enough to your barrier that you came from that allows you to get there in the first place and doesn't destroy your ship and you. But once you're that far, you will have to somehow penetrate all of the energy levels of the brown dwarf Saturn, in our case, the existing primordial collinear conjunction of planets, which have such energy going through them, charged by the sun, and no stability yet, not stable at all. The visiting alien would have to change its internal composition at the atomic level, and receive a great deal more energy and energy pressure at a scaled level. This just means that your body can hold a lot more charge without exploding. And to transition into this process, just to enter the golden age of another system, would be so catastrophic to you that you wouldn't survive. But bottom line. So, aliens don't visit us from other solar systems. It is very hard to do. Where do they come from? Well, it's very obvious. They come from our solar system, from other planets in our solar system, the ones that they tell us life cannot exist on. They say all of them, right? Only Earth life can exist. So, the history shows that when life starts on a planet, it goes through such a cataclysm, and technology is invented so rapidly that it hardly even matters if a visiting alien was there. They would be rather indistinguishable from some of the advanced races that pop out of the Golden Age in no time. So, anyway, back to the history. What do we know about aliens? Well, there was no such of a thing until essentially the Vatican and Swedish mystics like Emanuel Swedenborg started actually talking about the other planets. The only ones that were allowed to were religious people, and they all said, we recognize the other planets, they have life on them, we're monitoring them, we always have watched them in the sky, and but Earth is the only planet where Christ the Lord has came to save everyone. So within their religious doctrine, they were observing planets for the last 400 years and fighting with non-clerical observers as to the meaning. But at no point did Swedenborg say, oh no, these aliens are visiting us and they're influencing us and here's what they look like. He didn't get into that stuff. And it didn't really matter. When did it start mattering? Well, in the 19th century, there was literature about Martians, and they're more or less human. And there was no real notion that they could be like weird creatures. The idea of weird creatures only existed in the past, in fantasy versions of, like, say, Greek literature, like, full of monsters, which are mistranslated images in the sky and other things, archetypes. But as far as monsters that existed in contemporary times, nobody talked like that. And the first science fiction book to even mention aliens that could be visiting or influencing us was War of the Worlds, 1900 or 1889, I think, came out. And in that book, it made it clear. The speculation of the 19th century was that, yeah, of course, everyone knew there was Martians. And they always wondered, are they going to show themselves? Are they peaceful or what? So where do these Martians come from? They're not millions of years old. They're not part of an old society. In the Saturnian cosmology, in our history, we know exactly where they came from. Mars was the highest point of the Golden Age configuration, the collinear configuration, the highest place that you could stand foot. And above that was Saturn and Venus. And you could not stand in those places. So Mars became Atlantis, the highest, most powerful, advanced location in the Golden Age. And the Golden Age ended, Atlantis fell. And people are looking on Earth for the location, but actually it was on Mars, North Pole. So their civilization was just breakaway human civilization. And it wasn't very long ago, it was about 4,000, 5,000 years ago. And as they broke away, they only had a certain kind of influence on Earth, and that was telepathic. It was the only type of influence. They couldn't travel here. There was no advanced technology. There were no ships, spaceships, or anything. And that is the biggest proof of all that there were no visiting aliens, that we never attained technology beyond our needs, beyond what we were capable of at the time. Martians were capable of technology only a few hundred years ahead of ours, and they needed it. It was much harder to survive on Mars when it broke away from the configuration. The water became scarce, became seasonal, and Mars was so scarred, lightning scarred, the Prometheus story, that is basically a big desert. Can't really grow much on it. It has a lot of fish, and you can kind of get used to a certain type of food all the time, but it is nothing like Earth. It doesn't have the kind of plants and life that we do in abundance like we do. It only has stuff that could survive. So, War of the Worlds is a very sad book, if you really think about it. It's about how this race right next door felt like they had no choice. They needed our resources so badly they were willing to just come here in a catastrophic way and exterminate all life that they found. The book describes many times, like, no one can understand why they're killing everyone. Why would they do that? An entire city was destroyed right in the beginning of the invasion. And why did they not see their own destruction coming? How could they miss the virus that would then kill them all? And so, as I do believe this is redacted fiction, meaning it happened, and then they put it in the fiction category at some point in the past, 19th century, that's when they published it, mass published it, and then we became it. But the story was actually known in France for a long time. That's where a lot of the people who escaped the incident fled to. They fled to Europe and France. So, I'm sorry, fled from England to Europe, yeah. So, there's a couple questions that the book leaves open that doesn't answer. And since we know a little bit more these days, we know the history surrounding this timeline. 19th century was after the reset. Earth is a hard place to live, and somebody who caused the reset is trying to control all the regions, choosing people, bringing them to a promised land, dropping manna, all that kind of biblical stuff in the 19th century. And that's the reason why Bibles don't have dates, so that, this generation thinks that the events that happened, the next generation thinks it was in the past. I mean, it's obvious, but I've gone over this before. As people on Mars trying to control people on Earth in the 19th century, they had no way of controlling these stories that got out every time their missions failed, and that is exactly what the War of the Worlds book is about. It's about a failed mission. Something went really wrong on that mission. If it was successful, we would have never heard about it. It would have been like well, all the things we've heard of obviously had some kind of flaws. That's why we've heard of them, right? But I believe there were many tripod incursions in the last 200 years, and yeah, we don't hear about them unless something goes wrong. So what went wrong? Well, by the end of the story, and this took me a while to accept that this could have possibly really happened, you have these Martians on the hoods of tripods walking around in dead London, a city they just destroyed, and they're crying to each other. And there's about 50 of them, and most of them are dead, and there's a few left over on their tripods. They have nowhere else to go, and they're kind of walking around. One of them crashes directly into a building, and the humans think maybe it was lost control, but no, they don't lose control. Sometimes they want to die, and it's really hard. So it's a really sad story, right? These things are crying to each other. They screwed up. They're dying of a virus they apparently didn't see coming. So what could have really happened? What really happened? Well, one clue, in the pit surrounding London, a big excavated site by the diggers, there was a giant flying saucer. That's in the original book. A giant flying saucer that they built, that they were about to fly back to Mars. That's a big clue right there. You know, why are they so eager to fly back? Why don't they even have flying saucers yet? Why can't they test them there and bring them here? Okay, well, maybe those are limitations of physics that we don't know yet about. They had to come here and build the saucers. But there's another reason. They had to have a plan whereby the mission soldiers they sent would not like betray them and just say, hey, humans, you know, we don't want to be on Mars anymore, let's stay here. So if you look at wars, if you look at incursions in human history, you'll know that most of the people we send on missions like this are either mercenaries or slaves. And there's a very very slim difference between a mercenary and a slave once they're on the mission. They're basically owned by somebody. And if they don't do their job, they could be killed. So does Mars have slaves? Of course it does. That's the whole problem. In the 19th century, there was some kind of revolution there. They built a huge laser. They started shooting at us. That could have only possibly happened through slavery. And that's where all the clues are. Like in The Simpsons, predictive programming suggests that there was a slave-built giant laser shooting at another planet. And it could be just like Star Wars, another predictive programming where it was an empire. But the point is, people didn't necessarily want to go along with it. So you have people on Mars who don't want to go along with these horrible plans. What is the likelihood that they would have sent somebody to Earth who had the ability to betray them? Zero. So then it had to have been a slave. So then how can a slave not betray you? Well, you send them there in such a condition where they wouldn't survive without you, something that they need from you. So let's talk about the Martians. It also took me a while to accept that the book might have described the craziest looking creature, like a giant squid or octopus, a bear with two sections of Gorgon tentacles. But then, I realized, wait a sec, they just didn't know what they're looking at. I mean, you wouldn't watch the Matrix movies and think that those sentinels are living beings, right? But if you don't understand what the Matrix movie is about technology, you might think they are living beings, right? So, yeah, they probably saw some kind of weird hybrid creature, something that used to be human, for sure. For sure, there aren't many other species out there, it's just humans, humanoids and animals. The only ways that the plasma were able to create life in the first place. There's not many solutions. Humans are a solution, animals are solutions. You're not gonna find something crazy out there. Like, 3 eyes and actual tentacles. No, I don't think so. Tentacle creatures live in the ocean. And you can't convince me that ocean creatures learn to space travel. So anyway, used to be human, but now look like a giant bear with tentacles. And there's some clues that they glistened. All this stuff about brown, wet leather and shit, but the book really doesn't describe the creature very well, and that could have been a reduction. I don't know about that part. I do know that such creatures exist, that when humans are about to die, they can be put into machines. So much literature tells us about this, and now it's just a matter of whether or not it's suppressed. Yes, it is. Spoiler. It's a technology where you put your blood into a machine, and it keeps you alive, and you're still you, and you start to be able to control the machine. And yeah, you learn how to use the tentacles, and it's pretty crazy. I do believe that these types of creatures, these, what should I call them, dragoons, right? That's what they were in StarCraft. These types of machines were the ones that built all of the great concrete structures in the 19th century neoclassic style. You know, those government buildings where no one's really sure who the hell built them and how. So, back to the story. The Martians sent a bunch of slaves on the War of the Worlds mission to make sure that they would only have one way to survive. Build that saucer and come home. At which point they would be treated like royalty, you know, from being a prisoner or whatever they used to be. And they love that deal. How do I know slaves? There's a lot of clues. At one point, one of the tripods is shot by a cannon, and it just crashes into the ground and it's writhing in pain. In pain. It's clearly in pain. You know, things don't writhe when you lose control of them. You know, cars don't writhe when, you know, you take your hand off the wheel. Or anything else, actually. They just spin actual. So, when you see a machine that's acting like a living thing that's writhing in pain, you have to conclude that that is feeling pain. It felt that cannon, and it is now dying. And this kind of action would definitely anger the tripods. Other clues? They grabbed humans and they smashed them against trees. They were angry. There was a horse that was thrown against the wall. These things obviously broke into fits of rage, and that was what was described by the artilleryman. These things are angry. Wouldn't you be? I mean, you're put into a mechanical body, you're sent to Earth, gravity, and you're feeling terrible. I mean, you're not feeling good. Your body needs to get replenished by all these kinds of artificial technologies that only exist back home, and you need to get back home. So, what happened? Why did the mission go bad? It seems like they couldn't finish the saucer, but there was another reason. They were all sick and dying. So, another fact from the book that was hard for me to accept was the possibility that they were actually sucking blood out of humans that they captured. So gruesome, and just, you know, man, it looks like a likely redaction, right? It's probably redaction. No. I've come to accept it's probably happening. Why? Because these machines are very capable. They can do just about anything. They just can't, you know, build a better body for themselves or get out of being a machine. But they can inject blood and, you know, suck it out and inject it in their own. And when they do that, they feel 100%, 1,000%, a billion%. It's that whole adrenochrome thing. And they go from feeling like horrible slaves in a terrible predicament, racing against time, to feeling like gods. And they keep working too. No, they're like, don't worry, sir, I'm functioning, I'm doing it. And they keep building, and they keep, you know, spraying the gas and taking out the humans, collecting more humans, sucking them dry. These are details from this story, and I don't think H.G. Wells came up with any of these ideas himself. These are all too real to be fiction. And so that, therefore, you can see what went wrong. The slave creatures, the gargons, tentacle creatures, were injecting blood of humans. And that was a no-no. That was not part of the mission. No-no. I mean, everyone knew that was bad, but they were so desperate they did it. They're like, we gotta continue the mission this way. And as a result of that, they pretty much got sick and died. They got stranded on Earth. That's what it was. And they couldn't just go to humans and say, hey, help us. You know, these humans barely knew how to make trains. So anyway, this story is a big clue because it's the first science fiction story that involves aliens from another planet invading Earth. And before no such idea ever occurred to anyone. So probably that whole Occam's razor thing, the simplest explanation is that you couldn't make this stuff up back then. And there's so many details in the book, like side stories of other people who had similar encounters. And so anyway, these aliens are humans on Mars. There's the breakaway civilization, explained very clearly by Saturnian cosmology and our ancestors' story that what they all wrote down for us. And these guys, they're not all bad, but somehow they fell into the control of their own elite under this. There's a lot of movies that talk about what happened to Mars, actually. This one anime, 2015, sort of 3D kind of, I forget what it's called now, showed that there was a vaccine initiative on Mars, that they went and pretty much vaccinated everyone. And what it did was, it kind of screwed up all of the telepaths, because so many were telepathic on Mars, that if you took this thing, you would have the side effects and you'd lose your telepathic ability. And as they did, they were scoffed at by the elite, who said, you don't have any telepathic ability, you know? I don't have any, never heard of such a thing. And suddenly they pushed this notion that no one was telepath on Mars. And then they fluorided it, they added fluoride to the water, and then more or less shut down the water anytime some sect of Martian society ever resisted. So a lot more brutal of a suppression up there. And by the time they started implementing fluoride here on Earth and so forth, they already knew what they were doing. They already knew how to do it. And as you and I don't even know any telepaths today, they got rid of this ability here on Earth before we were ever aware of it. So their plans, essentially, which weren't, like I said, they weren't always unified, had everything to do with giving Earth a chance to allow them to rule us peacefully. And everything that's gone wrong, every war, has happened because we refused the plan. And it seems to me that England, the very first place to have a regicide, I mean a real serious regicide, you know, beheading the king and as a traitor, and then creating a republic, which gets brutally suppressed afterwards. You can see how these things are all orchestrated from Mars, a place where such rebellion is never allowed anyway. And they know exactly what to do to divide and conquer us. And they use our religions to to create a sort of power apparatus that only elite and family are allowed into. And so that's why I've concluded a long time ago that Martians have to be human simply because they're intermarried here on Earth. And you could say, well, that's because they've genetically modified this and create a hybrid species of the fallen angels. And okay, well, however you perceive that, the simplest explanation is that when you have two creatures mate, and you have a successful offspring, there has to have been a very similar genome. I mean, very similar. You know, you can't do it with a dog and a bird. So we're talking about so similar they can't tell the difference. And then people online would say, oh, but those are lizard people. Those are the draconians. Okay, maybe there are humanoid lizards out there. But they are human. They are simply cold-blooded, and they live on places and have lived in places for 1,000 years, which are very difficult for warm-blooded humans to survive. And their skin is different and scaly, but they're still humans. And yes, they can mate with our women. How much predictive programming do we see saying Mars needs women? It's all over the place. It's even in video games. So if you want to know who aliens are, what they are, you just gotta look at our history, because they fit into our Earth history. They're not part of a separate timeline. And our history is all about nepotism. Good guys and the bad guys rally behind their own families, their own people every time. One other little bit of well-known alien history, which is Roswell, New Mexico. I'll recap on what that was. At the point when the public started to become aware of flying saucers, it wasn't because aliens had showed up on Earth. That's not the reason. The reason is right there in our history again. It has everything to do with how World War II ended, and how the world, except for Russia, backed Nazi Germany the whole time it was taking over Europe, invading other countries. We wanted them to invade Poland. And we sponsored their advanced technology. There's a reason they build jets. They need them. They were building flying saucers. And saucers were not yet capable of winning a war, but they were the next big technology that was about to hit Earth. And that was the plan, to give us all flying technology back then. Everyone was expecting it. But because Hitler lost so badly in Russia in the winter of 41, they had to go with the backup plan, which was to put the enemies of the Nazis, who were the Jews, in charge of the world that we know today for the last 70 plus years. And they're always playing the one side and the other side. You know, this is exactly what a alien, non-terrestrial influence would do. And they would never show themselves. So when Roswell happened, that wasn't alien bodies. It was one of our UFOs. The Nazis were brought to America under paperclip. They continued to build advanced flying technology, but also all of our airplanes. Every airplane that we fly in today was built by Nazis under very secure conditions and with dubious technology. We don't know if all the planes use anti-gravity thrusters or not. I think they do. But the saucers, as soon as the 40s, as soon as World War II was ending, we weren't supposed to know about them ever again. We were under Operation Mockingbird told that they don't exist, and we're stupid if we think so, or insane, or they locked up a lot of people, they lobotomized a lot of people. It's really sad how many people went down just for having witnessed something. And that's what the Roswell story was. It was about a farmer who saw a disc crash in his farm, and believe me, this happens a lot. Okay, it's nothing unusual about Roswell, except that the farmer had sort of the tools to start excavating it and pulling out and letting everyone know. And a farm is sort of like a business, and it landed in the middle of a business. So it was impossible for the army to cover up. It was in the newspapers. And the part where the army treated everyone like crap, including the farmer, and the farmer was quoted as saying, "I regret ever telling the army about it," it's all in the newspaper too. So it was the army's disc, and the bodies and all that, those were just our American soldiers flying these things. Or probably, I don't know, whoever they got to fly these things. And they did die and all that. But as usual, the deep state has to cover these things up, and they just chose the only real path forward when it comes to stories that make it into our history, like War of the Worlds or Roswell, and that is to just label it a fiction and say, oh, never happened. And to promote it as a fiction, they increased substantially what Roswell was about. It wasn't one of our technologies that we're not supposed to know about landing in our backyard. It was an alien from another galaxy, solar system. And like in 1995, Independence Day, they even defined aliens as like locusts, roaming throughout the galaxy, and they're really trying to show us that aliens are this far away and unstoppable thing, unless they're so stupid you can hit them with a computer virus. So you can see that the predictive programming is pointing away from the truth. You just got to think about it to see where it's pointing, where the truth actually lies. Roswell wasn't aliens. It has nothing to do with aliens. It was just used to make us stop talking about aliens. And why wasn't Martians in there? Why don't we ever have any of those instances happen? Well, they really don't like coming here. They don't like being here. They don't like being in the sun this close. They don't like being vulnerable at all. It's within their rule book to not show themselves because they've spent 500 years now portraying themselves as the one God, creator of Earth. We're all supposed to worship them through churches. We're not, and their telepaths can listen to us. At least that was how it was set up in the past. These days there's 7 billion people praying, so I don't know if anyone can hear anything. But there was a reason that everyone was praying to God for the last 200 years, sort of sending energy to Mars. Yeah, good energies that they can then absorb. That's why they got the Chinese to have like this seasonal sort of everyone like praying all at once, like a million people praying kind of thing. Good energies. I would do that if I owned a planet. I would tell them to do that, and I would meditate on those days and receive it. So these are little clues. Anytime Mars is in opposition, the stock market has jumped because they're busy on our market. like facts I've been over before. So we know who the aliens are. They're right next door, and we know they can't travel to other places. So we know that they're not ancient. We know that they're not really in charge of us. Not like they show on Prometheus movie, where they've been here a billion years ago and there's nothing we can do about it. Or even in the War of the Worlds 2005 by Spielberg, where they were here a million years ago and buried their machines, anticipating a harvest in the future. Such a bad plot. They weren't even willing to say they were Martians. So anyway, that's the deal with aliens. They aren't really much different from illegal aliens crossing the border. They're just humans from an alien location. And it's their plans that we're seeing start this World War III. Part of the Great Reset. They've always reset us every time they lose control of us. And they started resetting us as a matter of course after a while, realizing that they will inevitably always lose control of us. They did this because they're desperate, and when they finally lose control, they will be even that much more desperate, having still depleted their resources, no longer receiving as much from us. You can see why many of them, even the good ones over there, are willing to keep this fight going, because it might mean the survival of their planet. But I don't think any of that will be necessary, because I know how we are on Earth. We are going to want to make peace with them, because we're going to want to go there, and we're going to want to run around in low gravity and theme parks and stuff. Believe me, we got a very interesting future ahead. Alright, that was a big rant. Hope I covered a lot. See you next time.